Rain mixed with ash as the rescue trucks screeched to a halt in the shattered remnants of Maple Street. The air stank of burned plastic and crushed stone. Buildings had folded in on themselves like paper. And then came the bark, sharp, desperate, echoing through the broken world. It came from beneath a mountain of debris. Rescuers ran toward it, expecting fear. But what they found made them freeze. A German shepherd, pinned halfway under a collapsed roof beam, wasn't trying to escape. It wasn't whining. It barked with laser focus, facing deeper into the rubble. Its eyes weren't pleading for help. They were warning them. They tried to reach it. It growled, not in fear, but in resistance. Its paw dug into the earth as if trying to hold back the collapse itself. It didn't want out. It wanted them in. Liam, a senior responder, crouched. He'd seen animals trapped before, but this was different. The dog was coated in soot, ribs visible from exhaustion, but its movements were precise, controlled, intentional. He extended a hand, whispering calm. The dog looked him dead in the eye, then barked again. 2 sharp yelps, then a deep, low growl toward the void behind it. Something or someone was in there. One of the rookies muttered, probably just stuck. Probably scared. Liam didn't believe it. He inched closer, brushing debris from the dog's back. A broken collar clinked, and dangling from it, a child's pink hair tie, stained but unmistakably human. Then something shifted. Beneath the rubble, just past where the dog pointed, something moved. Flash. Small. Flesh-toned. A hand. Wait, did you see that? Liam said, scrambling forward. The team froze. Liam crawled closer, voice low, shaking. There's someone under there. The dog barked twice, louder now, more urgent. Its tail thumped once against the concrete, then stopped. They began pulling stone. Hands bled, gloves tore, but they dug. Minutes passed. Every second was too long. Another rescuer reached down. I got something. Tiny shoe. They all paused. The kind of shoe that never belonged in a place like this. Glittery, pale blue, barely bigger than a hand. The kind a little girl wears when she's told she looks like a princess. And it was still warm. The dog whimpered and turned its head toward the shoe, then back to Liam. His body trembled, not from pain but urgency. They called for stretchers, backup, anything. But the comms crackled, unstable. No signal. Then the command came through on the emergency line. Secondary collapse likely. Evacuate sector immediately. They turned to leave. Liam stayed. The dog blocked his path, stepping in front of him, barking furiously. Then, without warning, it lunged. Its teeth locked onto the sleeve of a rescuer's jacket. Not biting, not harming, just holding, refusing to let go. Tension burst into chaos. What the hell is wrong with this dog? Liam yelled. It's not trying to hurt us. The rookie tried to shake free. The dog wouldn't budge. And then Liam saw it. The eyes. They weren't feral. They were pleading. The dog let go. It walked backward, sat, and barked 3 times toward the rubble. Then it lay down, head resting on the stone. Waiting. A rescuer whispered, "Why won't it leave?" Liam crouched beside it, hand trembling as he brushed dirt from the fur. He looked where the dog was staring, and froze. Inside the blackness, behind broken beams and cracked drywall, something looked back. Not fear, not a face, just 2 eyes, wide, unblinking, watching. Liam's breath caught. The girl's eyes didn't blink. They just stared through the cracks like she was frozen in time. Dust clung to her lashes. Her cheek was streaked with dried blood, but her gaze never wavered. The dog let out a low whimper, standing now, paw pressed against a slab of drywall. Every muscle in its body leaned toward her, but it didn't move recklessly. It stayed still, deliberate, like it knew that even one wrong move could collapse everything. Liam waved the team in closer, careful not to speak too loud. They needed to dig, but not in panic. Not in haste. Precision was everything. The girl was barely breathing, her chest rising in shallow, trembling gasps. They shifted bricks, pulled metal. Every sound echoed too loudly. Every second stretched like a wire ready to snap. And then came the voice. Faint, almost inaudible. Help! One word. Barely a whisper. But it sliced through the silence like a siren. The rookie who'd been bitten before went pale. He dropped to his knees and dug with his bare hands. Liam didn't stop him. No one spoke. There was only the sound of stone against skin and the soft, rhythmic growl of the dog, now pacing in tight, agitated circles. "Why won't she move?" someone asked. "She's stuck," Liam replied, eyes locked on the shifting rubble. Or, scared. As they peeled back layers, a piece of fabric came into view. Purple, glittery, a small backpack. Attached to it an ID tag. Isla, age 7. The name rang in Liam's ears. He'd seen that name before. It wasn't from the briefing. It wasn't from the neighborhood. It was older than that. He didn't have time to chase the memory. Not yet. Suddenly the radio burst to life, static slicing through the tension. "Rescue Unit Bravo, this is command. Immediate evacuation. Structural sensors show pressure building under Sector 3. Get out now." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "No," Liam said too quickly. "There's a child. She's alive." "Negative. Orders are clear. Pull out." The other rescuers looked at him, torn. Stay and risk the collapse or follow orders and abandon her. The dog made the decision for them. It darted into the crevice. Gasps erupted. A rescuer reached to pull it back, but the dog was already past the break. It squeezed between beams, paws scraping against steel. Liam shouted, but it didn't matter. The girl didn't scream. She didn't even flinch. She reached out a trembling hand, and the dog pressed its head against her fingers. Then something incredible happened. The girl whispered something into the dog's ear. No one could hear what she said. Not fully. But Liam caught a word. A name. Evie. He stiffened. That name wasn't on any list. That was the name of his daughter. The one who disappeared 5 years ago. His pulse thundered in his ears. The girl pulled something from beneath her chest and handed it to the dog. A photo. Crumpled. Torn at the edges. The dog took it in its mouth and crawled back out, eyes locked on Liam. He reached for it. His hands shook. It was a photograph of a playground. A familiar one. One that hadn't existed for years. In the center of the photo, 2 girls. One of them unmistakably his daughter. The other, the girl under the rubble. The radio crackled again. "Evacuate. Now. Give me 5 minutes," Liam said. "Just 5. No answer. He turned to the team. "If you want to leave, go." "I'm not moving." Silence. Then the rookie stepped forward. "We stay." Together they began to dig again. The dog paced, then lay down, paws crossed, gaze fixed, like it was praying. Liam worked like he'd never worked before. His nails cracked, his lungs burned, but he didn't stop. Then the earth moaned, a deep groan from below, the kind that means something terrible is about to happen. One of the beams split. Dust exploded upward. Someone screamed. Liam covered his face. When the dust cleared, a large section of the wall had collapsed inward. Everyone turned. The gap was wider now. They could see her. The girl lay curled, arm draped over something. Not rubble. A second body. Too small to be an adult. Too still to be alive. And the dog? The dog didn't move. It just let out one long, soul-ripping howl. Then silence. The howl echoed through the rubble like a memory refusing to die. Liam's heart stopped. The girl's hand still rested on the small, lifeless form beside her. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. A silence packed with guilt, shock, and something heavier. Something final. The dog didn't move. It sat stone still, eyes locked on the child. Not the living one. The one who hadn't made it. Its body trembled. Not from exhaustion, but from grief. Liam crawled forward. His breath was shallow now, dust thick in the air. Every movement brought more debris down from above. He knew they were living on borrowed time, but he couldn't leave her. Not like this. He reached for the girl. She flinched. He paused. Her eyes met his, haunted, searching, ancient. She looked at him like she knew him, like she had waited for this moment. But it wasn't just recognition. It was expectation, like she needed him to understand something. Evie, she whispered again. His throat closed. That name, that photo, the girl's face, the way the dog had found her. None of it made sense unless she was connected to his daughter. Liam turned to the dog. It stared back, muzzle stained with dust and something darker. It gave a low, almost human sound, a sigh full of weight. This wasn't just rescue anymore. It was something bigger, older. The other rescuers were quiet, watching, waiting for a command. But Liam wasn't in charge anymore. The dog was. He reached into the space and gently lifted the girl. Her skin was ice. Her lips cracked. But her heartbeat was still there, flickering like a candle in wind. The second body lay still. No pulse. No breath. A child. Maybe 5. Face hidden behind a sheet of plaster. Liam pulled the girl into his arms, and the dog followed, pressing its body against them like a guardian made of muscle and fire. It wouldn't leave her side. Not now. Not ever. They climbed back out as carefully as they could. One by one. The air grew thinner. The structure creaked. The wind outside howled louder now, as if the storm had picked up just to match the moment. Outside, medics rushed to take the girl. She refused to let go of the dog. The photo was still clutched in her hand. And that name burned through Liam's thoughts like a scar reopening. Evie. He pulled the rookie aside. I need you to run a name through the missing persons system. Evie Hayes. 5 years ago. Flood rescue zone. Went missing near East Valley. The rookie hesitated. That was you, wasn't it? Liam didn't answer. Inside the triage tent, the girl whispered again. She told me you'd come. Liam leaned in. Who did? Evie. She told me you'd find me. She said the dog remembers. Every word was a blade. 5 years ago, he gave up the search. Water levels too high. Visibility gone. His own daughter lost to a current that swallowed entire neighborhoods. He buried the guilt beneath work, steel, and silence. Now a child who shouldn't know that name was speaking it with tears in her eyes. The dog pushed its snout into the crook of Liam's arm. It whined once, then stared toward the destroyed house. Something still called to it. The radio crackled. New sensor data. Secondary collapse is off track. We have a 15-minute window if you need to re-enter. The team looked at Liam. He didn't speak. He just turned back toward the rubble. The dog was already moving. This time, no one argued. They followed. Inside, the light was different. The storm had shifted. The ceiling groaned with every step. But something deeper pulled them forward. They reached the same spot. And then the dog did something strange. It veered left, nose pressed low, following a scent no human could detect. Stopped at a wall. Then it sat, perfectly still. Liam knelt beside it. The wall was intact, but the floor beneath it wasn't. A crack. Faint, narrow, but running clean across. He pushed on it. Hollow. The dog barked once. Behind the wall, something shifted. Liam called for a crowbar. They pried it open. What they saw froze every breath in the room. A hidden space, low, cramped, dust-filled, and inside a row of tattered blankets. A girl's coat, a lantern, long dead, scratches on the wall, days marked in lines, and there, in the center, a backpack. The initials burned into it in fading ink. E.H. Evie Hayes, his daughter. Liam fell to his knees. His past had never been buried. It had been waiting, and the dog had never stopped looking. Liam couldn't move. The air in the hidden space was heavier than the rubble above it. Time had been sealed inside, scratch marks tallying days, drawings on the wall in crayon. A sun, a tree, 2 girls holding hands. One labeled Evie, the other, Isla. The pieces snapped together like glass under pressure. Isla wasn't just any girl. She was with Evie, had been for some time, maybe from the beginning, maybe after. But this wasn't just a hiding spot. It was survival, carved into darkness by 2 children no one believed could still be alive. Liam crawled into the space, each breath tighter than the last. His fingers brushed the backpack. Still zipped, still whole. He opened it with shaking hands. Inside, photos, torn, weathered, his daughter's face in every one. But these weren't his. They were taken after she disappeared. She'd been alive, longer than anyone knew. Behind him, the dog let out a low, mournful sound, pawing gently at the floor. Then it lay down at the entrance, head on its paws, like it had finally completed its mission. Liam turned the photos over. On the back of one, written in shaky handwriting, he lied. Don't trust him. If I'm gone, find Isla. Liam's blood ran cold. Who lied? Why would Evie write this? He looked back at the wall. More words scratched below the tallies. I saw him take her. Liam stood too fast. His head struck the beam above and dust rained down. But the pain didn't matter. His heart pounded now, not with fear, but with rage. Evie hadn't drowned. She hadn't run. She'd been taken. And Isla had seen it happen. Outside, the wind screamed louder. Another aftershock hit. Light this time, but enough to make the beams groan again. Liam backed out of the space. Isla was resting in the triage tent, eyes closed but breathing steadier now. The medics were quiet, hands hovering like they knew her stillness was fragile. He crouched beside her. Isla, he said softly, you were with Evie, weren't you? She opened her eyes slowly. She saved me. Liam swallowed hard. Do you know where she is now? Isla looked away, tears gathering. He took her, said she was trouble, said I was quiet, that I'd forget. But you didn't. Isla shook her head. I tried to find someone, but no one listened. Only the dog listened. Liam reached into his pocket, pulling out the photo Evie had passed to Isla, the one the dog carried from the rubble. He turned it over again. There was a number, faint, a code, not a phone number, coordinates. He stared at it, burned it into memory. He stood. The dog was waiting at the exit, tail still, eyes locked on the horizon. It knew. Back at command, Liam scanned the photo into the system, ran facial matches on Isla's picture, pulled up a file that had been closed 3 years ago. Child removed from foster placement after disappearance of second ward. The name of the second child, Evie Hayes, but under status, presumed deceased. Liam's voice cracked as he read it aloud. The lie had made it official. It had ended every search, every rescue, except for the dog. It had followed Isla's scent, followed the photo, found the coordinates somehow, and stayed there, waiting. A rescuer handed Liam a GPS device. He punched in the code. A rural zone, 40 miles out, isolated, off-grid. The storm was moving fast now. Roads were closing, but he didn't wait for clearance. He took the dog. He drove. As the truck tore through the rain and the night, Liam glanced at the dog curled in the seat beside him. It stared straight ahead, ears perked, posture stiff, like it knew the road, like it had taken this path before. Lights in the distance, an old farmhouse, boarded windows, no signs of life, until the dog sat up and growled. Liam killed the engine. Silence. Then a creak. A figure stepped onto the porch. Not a stranger. Someone Liam knew. Someone he never expected to see here. The man who ran the original rescue operation. The one who'd called off the search. The one who filed the death certificate. His former supervisor. Liam stepped out into the storm, fists clenched, voice razor-sharp. Where is she? The man didn't flinch. You should have let it go. The dog stepped in front of Liam, growling now, deep and primal. Behind them, the farmhouse door creaked open, and a girl's voice rang out, broken but defiant. Dad! The word shattered the storm. Liam froze. His breath caught in his chest like it didn't belong to him. The porch light flickered, revealing a silhouette behind the open door. Small, thin, familiar. A girl's frame, outlined in the downpour, one hand gripping the edge of the doorframe like it was all that held her to the earth. Evie, he whispered. She stepped into the light. Her eyes met his, older than they should be, full of scars and survival. But they were his daughter's eyes. No doubt. No hesitation. The dog barked once. Sharp, certain, and ran to her. Evie collapsed to her knees as it buried its head into her chest. Her hands clutched its fur like she hadn't touched something real in years. Behind her, the man on the porch didn't move. Liam stepped forward. Every muscle in his body ached to run to her, to grab her and never let go. But the rage was rising now, boiling behind his ribs. "You knew," Liam said, eyes locked on the man. "You knew she was alive. You knew where she was." The man didn't deny it. His voice came low and calm. Too calm. "She was a threat to the settlement. She remembered too much. We kept her safe." "Safe?" Liam spat. "You buried her. You signed her death. She survived because of us. Because we kept her away from the system." Evie stood now, her face twisted with something sharp. Anger, sorrow, betrayal. "You told me my dad left. That he didn't want me. You said no one came." The man finally looked shaken. "You were just a child. You wouldn't have understood." "I understood enough." Lightning split the sky. Thunder rolled over the hills. Liam stepped closer. "You lied to her. You let a father bury a daughter. You let a city stop searching. She was better off here." Liam's hands curled into fists. "You think hiding a child like stolen property is protection? You think letting her believe she was abandoned was mercy?" The dog growled louder now, teeth bared. Evie took a step back toward Liam. "I wanted to go home," she whispered. "I waited. Every night. I thought you forgot me." He broke then. Completely. His knees hit the mud and the pain of 5 years spilled from his throat in one long, fractured breath. "I never stopped," he said. "I never stopped, Evie. I just couldn't find you." She ran to him, and the world stopped. Father and daughter, buried under 5 years of silence, held each other like they were trying to make up for every second they'd lost. But the storm didn't stop, and neither did the danger. Behind them, the man moved. From his coat, he drew a weapon. The dog spun, barking, standing between them again. Liam shielded Evie, eyes wide. "You're not taking her again," he said. The man didn't hesitate. He raised the gun. And that's when the dog lunged. Everything blurred, rain, movement, shouting. The gun fired. The dog collided with the man mid-shot, driving him backward. The bullet missed Liam's head by inches. It splintered behind him. The man hit the porch hard, the weapon skidding into the grass. The dog stood over him, snarling, jaws inches from his throat. Liam picked up the gun and pointed it straight at the man's chest. "No one's going to believe you," the man said. "You'll go down with me. You broke protocol. You defied command." Liam's voice didn't shake. "Then I'll go down telling the truth." Evie stepped beside him. Her voice was a whisper again. "There are others. Girls. Like me. In the basement." Liam turned to her, face pale. "You're sure?" She nodded. "He called them backups." His stomach turned. He radioed it in. Every frequency. Every channel. Code black. Immediate extraction. Multiple miners held against will. I repeat, code black. Static. Then voices. Backup was coming. Liam turned to the man. "You're done." Sirens in the distance. Lights through the trees. Evie's hand found his. The dog sat beside them both. Soaked, bleeding, but unbroken. The nightmare was over. Almost. As the man was taken away in cuffs, Evie clutched her father tighter. "I kept her photo," she said. "Isla. I told her you'd find her. I promised." "She's safe now," Liam whispered. "Because of you." "No. Because of him." She looked down at the dog, who rested his head on her knee. He never gave up. Neither had she. But there was still one more truth waiting in the dark. And it was buried deeper than any of them had dared to dig. They returned to the site at first light. The storm had passed, but the sky still hung low, gray and cold. Mud soaked the earth where the rubble once stood. The house was gone, flattened, but Liam knew something still lived beneath it. Not just bones or dust, but answers. Evie stood beside him, wrapped in a blanket, eyes fixed on the foundation. The dog didn't bark, didn't move. It simply walked ahead, slowly, deliberately, toward the broken remains. It stopped near the corner. Sniffed. Saturday. Liam followed. What remained of the basement had collapsed in on itself. Rescuers had set up floodlights, and now, under orders, heavy machinery was digging. No one questioned him anymore. No one asked if this was over. Because it wasn't. A rescue worker waved Liam over. They'd hit something under the debris. Not wood. Not concrete. A metal trapdoor. Liam dropped down and cleared the edges himself. The dog stood watch behind him, tail still. When they pulled it open, the smell hit first. Old air. Mold. Rot. Then the sound. A cough. Weak. Fragile. But human. Liam's heart nearly burst. The ladder beneath led to a narrow passage. Lined with blankets, discarded clothes, makeshift bedding. And children. 4 of them. Eyes wide, hollow with fear. Evie moved before anyone else. She dropped into the hole and called softly. It's okay. He's my dad. He's safe. The children didn't speak. They just stared at her like she was a ghost. And maybe, to them, she was. She helped the first child up. A boy, maybe 6, thin as wire. Then a girl. Then another. The last was barely more than a toddler, silent, holding a torn doll in one hand. Liam lifted each one out. The dog stayed by the opening, eyes darting between them all, as if counting. When the last child surfaced, it let out a soft, satisfied huff. Evie placed a trembling hand on its head. I told them you'd come, she whispered. The medics moved in quickly. Blankets, water, calm voices. But nothing could erase what those children had lived through. Evie sat beside Liam now, quiet. The dog curled beside her, chest rising and falling with slow, deep breaths. Blood still stained its fur. The wound from the night before was deeper than they thought. A vet rushed over. We need to move fast. He's losing blood. Evie clung tighter. No, she said, voice breaking. He needs to stay. He won't survive out here, the vet replied. Liam stepped in. Take him. Do everything you can. I'll cover it. Whatever it takes. The vet nodded and gently lifted the dog onto the stretcher. Evie walked beside him the whole way, one hand resting on his paw. At the vehicle, she leaned in and whispered something. Liam couldn't hear it. She turned back, tears streaming silently, and walked into his arms. A week passed. The house was sealed off. Investigations spread. Arrests made. Hidden files uncovered. The man responsible hadn't worked alone. But none of that mattered compared to what Evie did next. She stood before a room full of cameras and reporters, Isla beside her, holding her hand. She didn't speak long. Just enough. We were never lost. We were left behind. And this dog, he didn't stop. When no one else listened. He did. Liam stood in the back, silent, watching his daughter not just survive, but lead. Afterward, she handed him something. The diary. Her old one. Found in the rubble, pages torn, water damaged. But one line stood out, scratched into the back cover in shaky handwriting. If I bark, promise you'll listen. Liam swallowed hard. I heard you, he said. She nodded. Finally, they visited the dog in recovery the next day. He was weak, stitched up, barely able to lift his head. But when Evie walked in, his tail moved. Just once. Enough. She curled up beside him on the floor. Liam joined them, and for the first time in 5 years, his world was whole again. Not perfect, but real, and still breathing. Somewhere outside, wind stirred through the trees. Another siren echoed in the distance. But here, in this moment, all that remained was a girl, a dog, and a father, bound not by blood or time, but by survival, loyalty, and a promise that had finally been kept. Like, share, and never stop listening.
Imagine hiking through the remote wilderness of Wyoming when you hear desperate whinnying echoing through the forest, leading you to discover a magnificent wild Mustang mare trapped beneath a massive fallen tree. slowly being crushed to death. That's exactly what happened to wilderness survival expert Mark Rodriguez when a freak windstorm caught him during a solo camping trip in the Wind River Range. The mare, pinned for hours with a 2,000-pound pine trunk across her back, should have died from her injuries. But what Mark discovered when he managed to free her would challenge everything wildlife experts thought they knew about equine survival instincts and lead to the birth of the most genetically valuable wild horse foal in North American history. This is the extraordinary true story of Luna, the Mustang mare whose rescue became a race against time that would revolutionize wild horse conservation and prove that sometimes the most desperate moments can create the most miraculous outcomes. Mark Rodriguez had been leading wilderness survival expeditions for 22 years, but he'd never experienced anything quite like the sudden windstorm that hit the Wind River Range that September afternoon. As a former Marine and certified wilderness EMT, Mark was no stranger to dangerous weather, but the ferocity of the winds that day, gusting up to 70 mph, had forced him to abandon his planned route and seek shelter in a dense grove of ancient pines. It was 4:17 p.m. when the massive tree came down, the sound of its fall echoing through the mountains like thunder. Mark had taken cover behind a granite boulder about 200 yards away, watching in awe as century-old trees snapped like matchsticks in the wind. When the storm finally passed 20 minutes later, the forest looked like a war zone, fallen timber everywhere, creating an almost impassable maze of destruction. Mark was assessing the damage and planning his road out when he heard it, a desperate, haunting whinny that cut through the mountain silence like a cry for help. The sound was coming from the direction of the heaviest tree damage, and something about its urgency made Mark abandon his own evacuation plans and head toward the sound. What he found when he reached the source of the crying would be burned into his memory forever. A magnificent Mustang mare, probably 8 to 9 years old, with a beautiful bay coat and distinctive white markings, was trapped beneath a massive ponderosa pine that had fallen directly across her back. The tree, which Mark estimated at over 60 feet tall and weighing at least 2,000 pounds, had her completely pinned to the forest floor. But she was alive. The mare's intelligent dark eyes tracked Mark's movement as he approached, and despite her desperate situation, she showed no fear of human presence, only a desperate hope that this two-legged creature might be able to help her where she couldn't help herself. Mark's wilderness EMT training kicked in immediately as he assessed the situation. The tree trunk was positioned across the mare's lower back and hindquarters, but miraculously, it was partially supported by other fallen timber, creating just enough space to prevent her from being completely crushed. She could lift her head and front legs, but her back legs were completely immobilized. "Easy, girl," Mark said softly as he moved closer. "Let me see what we're dealing with here." The mare's condition was critical, but not immediately fatal. The tree's weight was distributed across her strong back muscles rather than her spine, and her breathing, while labored, was regular. But Mark could see that she was suffering from shock, dehydration, and exhaustion. From the condition of the ground around her, she'd been trapped for several hours, probably since the storm began. Most concerning of all was something Mark noticed that changed everything about the rescue. The mare was heavily pregnant, her sides showing the unmistakable bulge of a foal due very soon, possibly within days or even hours. "Oh my God," Mark whispered as the full implications hit him. "You're not just fighting for your own life, are you?" The mare's eyes seemed to confirm his realization, and Mark understood that he wasn't just looking at a trapped wild horse. He was looking at 2 lives hanging in the balance, with time running out rapidly. Mark's satellite communicator had been damaged in the storm, his cell phone had no signal in the remote mountains, and the nearest road was 15 miles away, through terrain that was now virtually impassable due to fallen trees. Traditional rescue resources were hours away, even if he could contact them. But looking into the mare's trusting eyes, Mark Rodriguez made a decision that would challenge every limit of his wilderness survival skills and push him beyond anything he'd experienced in 2 decades of mountain rescue work. He was going to attempt something that had probably never been tried before, a solo wilderness rescue of a 1,200-pound pregnant wild horse using nothing but primitive equipment and determination. What Mark didn't know was that he was about to witness and assist in one of the most extraordinary events in wild horse conservation history. With daylight fading and the mare's condition deteriorating, Mark faced an engineering challenge that would have daunted a full rescue team with heavy equipment. The 2,000-pound pine trunk needed to be lifted just enough to allow the mare to pull herself free, but Mark had only the basic survival tools in his backpack: rope, a small axe, a folding saw, and his wilderness survival knowledge. Mark's marine engineering training had taught him that leverage could overcome seemingly impossible weight disadvantages. The key was finding the right fulcrum point and creating a lever system that could multiply his 180-pound frame into enough force to move a tree that weighed more than 10 times his body weight. Working frantically as the mountain temperature began dropping toward freezing, Mark identified a massive granite boulder about 20 feet from the fallen tree. Using his rope and a complex system of pulleys created from gear carabiners, he began constructing what was essentially a primitive crane system. The mare watched his every movement with intelligent eyes, occasionally whinnying softly as if encouraging his efforts. Despite her pain and exhaustion, she seemed to understand that this human was her only hope for survival. "Just hold on, girl," Mark said as he worked. "We're going to get you out of this." But as Mark prepared for his first attempt to lift the tree, he noticed something that made his heart race with urgency. The mare was showing early signs of labor. Her breathing had changed, becoming deeper and more rhythmic, and she was showing the restless movements that indicated foaling might be imminent. Mark's wilderness EMT training included some veterinary knowledge, and he knew that horses could not give birth while lying on their sides, especially not while trapped under a tree. If the mare went into active labor while still pinned, both she and her foal would die. The first attempt to lift the tree moved it only about 3 inches, not nearly enough for the mare to escape, but enough to prove that Mark's lever system could work. The mare felt the pressure relief and struggled valiantly to free herself, but the opening was too small. Mark adjusted his fulcrum point and tried again. This time the tree lifted 6 inches, still not enough, but progress. The mare's struggles were becoming more desperate, and Mark could see signs that her labor was advancing rapidly. "Come on," Mark muttered, resetting his leverage system for a third attempt. "This has to work." The third attempt was when everything changed. Mark threw his entire body weight against the lever arm, and the massive tree lifted nearly a foot off the mare's back. For a crucial 10 seconds, there was enough space for her to potentially escape. But the mare, weakened by hours of entrapment and advancing labor, couldn't coordinate her movements quickly enough to escape before Mark's strength gave out and the trees settled back down. Mark collapsed against his makeshift lever, exhausted and running out of options. The mare was clearly in active labor now, her contractions visible even to Mark's untrained eye. They had minutes, not hours, before the situation became irreversible. That's when Mark made a decision that went against every safety protocol he'd ever learned in wilderness rescue. Instead of trying to move the tree again, he was going to crawl under it and try to assist the mare's labor while she was still trapped. It was incredibly dangerous. If his lever system failed while he was underneath, both he and the mare would be crushed. But looking at the trust in her eyes and seeing her desperate contractions, Mark knew it was their only chance. "Okay, girl," Mark said as he prepared to crawl into the space beneath the fallen tree. "We're going to do this together, and we're both going to survive." What happened next would test every limit of human courage and animal determination in one of the most extraordinary birth scenarios ever documented in wilderness survival history. Crawling beneath the massive pine trunk was one of the most terrifying experiences of Mark's life. The tree, held up only by his improvised leverage system and a few supporting branches, could collapse at any moment, crushing both him and the mare. But as he positioned himself behind the laboring Mustang, Mark realized he was about to witness something unprecedented in wild horse documentation. The mare was in full labor, her contractions powerful and regular, but her position made natural birth nearly impossible. Wild horses instinctively stand or squat during foaling, but pinned on her side beneath the tree, the mare couldn't assume any normal birthing position. Without intervention, both she and her foal would die within the hour. Mark's wilderness EMT training included basic animal birth assistance, knowledge he'd never expected to use in conditions like this. Working by touch in the cramped space beneath the tree, with only the light from his headlamp, Mark began what would become one of the most challenging emergency deliveries ever attempted in the field. "Easy, girl," Mark whispered as he assessed the situation. "Let's bring your baby into the world." The foal was positioned correctly for birth, but the mare's awkward position was preventing normal progress. Mark would have to manually assist the delivery while lying on his stomach in the dirt, working around the massive tree trunk that could crush them both at any moment. The mare seemed to understand that Mark was trying to help. Despite the pain of her contractions and the terror of being trapped, she remained surprisingly calm, turning her head to watch Mark with eyes that seemed to communicate trust across species barriers. Mark's first priority was creating more space. Using every ounce of strength, he managed to dig out dirt and debris from beneath the mare, giving her slightly more room to maneuver during contractions. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make the birth mechanically possible. The crucial moment came when Mark could see the foal's front hooves beginning to emerge. In normal circumstances, the mare would be standing and gravity would assist the birth. Trapped on her side, she needed human help to guide her foal safely into the world. Working with the mare's contractions rather than against them, Mark provided gentle assistance as the foal's head and shoulders emerged. The baby was alive. He could see its nostrils flaring as it took its first breaths, but the most dangerous part of the delivery was still ahead. Wild horse births normally take just 15 to 20 minutes from start to finish, but this delivery was taking much longer due to the mare's position. Mark could feel her strength beginning to fade, and he knew they were running out of time before exhaustion overcame her instinct to fight for her foal's life. The moment that changed everything came when the foal's hips became lodged during delivery, a complication that would be dangerous even in a veterinary hospital, but potentially fatal in wilderness conditions. Mark had to make a split-second decision that could save or kill both mother and baby. Using techniques he had learned in emergency medical training, Mark provided rotational assistance to help the foal's shoulders and hips navigate the birth canal. It was incredibly delicate work, requiring perfect timing with the mare's contractions and precise pressure to avoid injury. And then, at 6:47 p.m., as the sun was setting over the Wind River Mountains, Mark felt the foal slide free into his hands, alive, breathing, and perfect. The newborn colt was small but beautifully formed, with his mother's bay coloring and the distinctive primitive markings that indicated pure Mustang bloodlines. More importantly, he was vigorous and healthy, lifting his head and attempting to move within seconds of birth. But the miracle wasn't complete yet. The mare and her newborn were still trapped beneath a tree that could collapse at any moment, and Mark still had to find a way to get them both to safety before the mountain night turned deadly cold. The rescue had become a birth, but now the birth had to become an escape, and Mark was running out of both time and strength to make it happen. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been studying wild horse genetics for 15 years, but she'd never received a call quite like the one that came from Wyoming. Game and fish at 9 p.m. that night. A wilderness survival expert had somehow managed to rescue a trapped Mustang mare and assist in the birth of her foal under conditions that should have been impossible for survival. "Dr. Vasquez, you need to get here as soon as possible," said Officer Jake Martinez from the Wind River Field Station. "This isn't just a successful rescue. There's something about this mare and foal that's going to change everything we know about Mustang genetics." Elena, a geneticist specializing in rare horse bloodlines at Colorado State University, caught the first flight to Wyoming the next morning. What she found when she reached the temporary holding facility would revolutionize wild horse conservation efforts across North America. Mark had successfully freed both mare and foal, using a combination of his lever system and the mare's renewed strength after giving birth. The baby's arrival seemed to give the mother a surge of adrenaline that allowed her to finally pull herself free when Mark lifted the tree for a fourth time. Both horses were healthy, bonded, and showing remarkable resilience after their traumatic experience, but Dr. Vasquez's excitement had nothing to do with the dramatic rescue story. Her focus was entirely on the mare's physical characteristics and bloodline indicators that were visible even to untrained eyes. "Mark, do you understand what you've saved?" Dr. Vasquez asked as she completed her initial examination. "This mare shows genetic markers that we haven't seen in wild populations for over 30 years. The mare, whom Mark had named Luna for the moon that had provided light during their desperate night in the mountains, displayed a combination of primitive markings and physical characteristics that indicated she was descended from one of the rarest Mustang bloodlines in North America. The Kieger Mustang lineage that traced directly back to Spanish horses brought to the Americas in the 1600s. Her dorsal stripe, leg barring, and facial features are textbook examples of Spanish colonial horse genetics," Dr. Vasquez explained. "But more importantly, her mitochondrial DNA markers, which we can determine from hair samples, indicate she's carrying genetic material that we thought was extinct in wild populations." The foal, a beautiful colt with even more pronounced primitive markings than his mother, represented something unprecedented in wild horse conservation. A pure Spanish colonial Mustang born in the wild with complete genetic documentation of his birth and early development. "This colt isn't just rare, he's irreplaceable," Dr. Vasquez told the gathering team of wildlife officials. "His genetic value for preserving endangered Mustang bloodlines is incalculable. He represents genetic diversity that could strengthen wild horse populations across the entire American West." But the discovery created an unexpected dilemma for wildlife management officials. Luna and her colt were wild horses, legally protected, but also subject to Bureau of Land Management regulations about wild horse populations and territory management. Their genetic value made them too important to simply release back into the wild without protection, but their wild status meant they couldn't be treated as domestic horses. Mark found himself at the center of a conservation debate that attracted attention from geneticists, wildlife officials, and horse conservation groups across the country. His wilderness rescue had uncovered one of the most genetically valuable horse families in North America, but their future was now uncertain. "I didn't save them to see them end up in bureaucratic limbo," Mark told Dr. Vasquez during one of their planning meetings. "Luna trusted me to help her bring her baby into the world safely. Now I need to make sure they both have a future that honors what they represent." The solution would require creating an entirely new approach to wild horse conservation, one that balanced genetic preservation with wild horse protection and honored both the scientific value and the wild nature of Luna and her remarkable colt. What emerged from this challenge would become a model for wild horse conservation that protected genetic diversity while preserving the freedom that makes Mustangs the living symbols of American wilderness. 6 months after the rescue, Luna and her colt, now named Ranger for his birth in the wilderness, had become the cornerstone of the most innovative wild horse conservation program in United States history. The solution developed by Dr. Vasquez, Mark, and federal wildlife officials created a new model that protected genetic treasures while preserving wild horse freedom. The Wind River Genetic Sanctuary was established as a protected 10,000-acre range specifically designed for genetically valuable Mustang families. Unlike traditional wild horse management areas, the sanctuary combined cutting-edge genetic research with hands-off wild horse protection, allowing rare bloodlines to thrive in natural conditions while ensuring their genetic contributions were preserved for future generations. Luna and Ranger became the sanctuary's first residents, but they weren't alone for long. Dr. Vasquez's genetic testing had identified 12 other Mustangs from various Western herds that carried similar rare genetic markers. These horses were relocated to the sanctuary, creating the first scientifically managed wild horse herd focused specifically on genetic preservation. What Mark's rescue taught us is that individual animals can carry irreplaceable genetic value. Dr. Vasquez explained to a gathering of international equine geneticists. Luna's bloodline represents genetic material that took 400 years to develop and could have been lost forever in a single windstorm. The sanctuary's innovative approach attracted attention from horse conservation programs worldwide. Instead of traditional roundups and adoptions, the program used advanced genetic monitoring and minimal intervention management. The horses lived completely wild lives while contributing to a genetic database that was revolutionizing understanding of equine evolution and adaptation. Mark's role in the program extended far beyond his original rescue. His wilderness survival skills and deep understanding of natural ecosystems made him the perfect field coordinator for the sanctuary. He developed monitoring techniques that allowed researchers to study the horses without disturbing their natural behaviors. Luna taught me that sometimes the most important conservation work happens one individual at a time. Mark reflected during a documentary about the program. Her rescue wasn't just about saving 2 horses. It was about preserving genetic heritage that belongs to all of America. Ranger's development became a case study in optimal wild horse genetics. His growth, behavior, and physical development were documented by researchers, but he remained completely wild, learning natural behaviors from his mother and the other sanctuary horses. By 6 months old, he was already showing the intelligence, agility, and hardiness that made Spanish colonial horses legendary. The economic impact of the sanctuary exceeded all expectations. The combination of cutting-edge genetic research and authentic wild horse conservation attracted ecotourism, research funding, and educational partnerships that brought millions of dollars to Wyoming's economy while supporting world-class conservation science. International delegations visited the sanctuary to learn techniques that could be applied to endangered horse breeds worldwide. The Luna Protocol, the combination of emergency genetic assessment and immediate protection for valuable individuals, was adopted by conservation programs from Mongolia to Australia. But perhaps the most meaningful outcome was the impact on wild horse policy nationwide. Luna and Ranger's story demonstrated that individual horses could carry genetic value that justified extraordinary protection efforts. This led to new federal guidelines for evaluating wild horses before roundups and created fast-track protection procedures for genetically significant animals. The program's success also changed how Americans viewed wild horses. Instead of seeing them as management problems or romantic symbols, people began understanding Mustangs as living repositories of genetic heritage that connected modern America to its historical roots in Spanish colonization and westward expansion. Dr. Vasquez's research with Luna's bloodline led to breakthroughs in understanding how horses adapted to North American environments over 4 centuries. This knowledge was being applied to breeding programs for domestic horses, creating healthier, more resilient animals that required fewer medical interventions and could thrive in challenging conditions. 5 years after Mark's desperate rescue in the Wyoming wilderness, Luna and Ranger had become symbols of what was possible when conservation science combined with individual heroism to protect irreplaceable natural heritage. 10 years after that September windstorm in the Wind River Range, the rescue of Luna had grown into a conservation success story that transformed how the world approached endangered equine genetics. The Wind River Genetic Sanctuary had become an international model for species preservation, hosting research programs from 6 countries and protecting the largest collection of genetically documented Spanish colonial Mustangs in the world. Luna, now a magnificent 18-year-old matriarch, had produced 3 more foals, each carrying the precious genetic markers that made her family irreplaceable. Her bloodline had been used to strengthen wild horse populations across 7 states, with her genetic material helping to restore diversity that had been lost from Mustang herds over decades of unmanaged breeding. Ranger had grown into a powerful stallion who led his own band within the sanctuary, demonstrating the leadership and intelligence that made Spanish colonial horses legendary among early American settlers. His offspring carried forward the genetic legacy that Mark's wilderness rescue had preserved, ensuring that Luna's bloodline would continue for generations. Mark Rodriguez had become one of America's most respected wildlife conservationists, his rescue techniques and genetic preservation protocols being taught in universities worldwide. The Mark Rodriguez Wilderness Conservation Institute trained field biologists in emergency rescue and genetic assessment techniques, ensuring that future discoveries of rare animals would be handled with the same combination of courage and scientific precision that had saved Luna. What I learned from Luna is that conservation isn't just about protecting populations, it's about recognizing the irreplaceable value of individuals, Mark explained to graduate students during a lecture at Colorado State University. Sometimes the most important genetic heritage in the world is carried by a single animal who needs help at exactly the right moment. Dr. Vasquez's research with Luna's genetic material had revolutionized understanding of horse evolution in North America. Her published papers on Spanish colonial horse genetics were required reading in veterinary schools and had influenced breeding programs for domestic horses worldwide. The Luna Genome Project had mapped the complete genetic sequence of Spanish colonial horses, creating a reference that would guide equine genetics for decades. The economic impact of the sanctuary had grown beyond all projections. The combination of cutting-edge research, ecotourism, and educational programs generated over $50 million annually for Wyoming's economy while supporting world-class conservation science. The sanctuary hosted 200,000 visitors per year, each leaving with a deeper understanding of the connection between individual animal welfare and species conservation. International recognition of the program had led to partnerships with horse conservation efforts worldwide. Techniques developed at Wind River were being used to protect endangered horse breeds in Mongolia, restore rare bloodlines in Europe, and strengthen domestic horse populations in developing countries. But perhaps the most meaningful legacy was cultural. Luna and Ranger's story had changed how Americans viewed their relationship with wild animals and natural heritage. Instead of seeing wild horses as either romantic symbols or management problems, people began understanding them as living connections to American history that deserve protection based on their intrinsic and genetic value. Children's books, documentaries, and educational programs featuring Luna's story had inspired a new generation of conservationists who understood that heroism could be as simple as refusing to walk away when an animal needed help. Mark's example showed that individual actions could have impacts far beyond their immediate circumstances. The 10th anniversary of the rescue was marked by the dedication of the Luna Memorial Education Center, where visitors could learn about the intersection of genetics, conservation, and individual heroism. The center's most popular exhibit was a recreation of the fallen tree rescue, complete with Mark's original lever system and recordings of his detailed account of that desperate night. Standing in the sanctuary with Luna and her family grazing peacefully around him, Mark often reflected on how a moment of choice in the wilderness had created ripple effects that would continue for generations. Luna's rescue had proven that sometimes the most ordinary people, in the most unexpected circumstances, can preserve the most extraordinary treasures for all humanity. The windstorm that nearly killed Luna had instead become the beginning of a conservation revolution that honored both wild freedom and genetic heritage, proving that the best conservation outcomes happen when human courage meets animal resilience at exactly the right moment in time. Luna's incredible journey from near death under a fallen tree to becoming the matriarch of one of America's most important wild horse conservation programs proves that extraordinary outcomes can emerge from the most desperate circumstances. What started as one man's refusal to ignore an animal in distress became a story that revolutionized wild horse conservation, preserved irreplaceable genetic heritage, and demonstrated the profound connections between individual heroism and species preservation. This story reminds us that some of our most valuable natural treasures exist in single individuals who might be lost forever without someone willing to take extraordinary risks to help them. Mark's decision to crawl under a 2,000-pound tree to assist Luna's labor didn't just save 2 lives. It preserved genetic material that had taken 4 centuries to develop and could never be replaced once lost. Luna's legacy extends far beyond her own remarkable survival. Her bloodline has strengthened wild horse populations across the American West. Her story has inspired new approaches to conservation that balance genetic science with wild animal welfare. And her rescue has become a symbol of how individual actions can have impacts that last for generations. The Wind River Genetic Sanctuary continues to prove that the best conservation happens when we recognize the irreplaceable value of individual animals while preserving their freedom to live as wild creatures. Luna and Ranger's story shows that sometimes the most important conservation work happens one animal at a time, with one person willing to risk everything to preserve something irreplaceable. If Luna's miracle inspired you, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell for more incredible true stories of conservation heroism, genetic discoveries, and the amazing resilience of wild animals. Share this video with someone who believes in the importance of preserving natural heritage, because Luna's story proves that sometimes the most extraordinary conservation successes begin with the simplest decision to help when help is needed most. And tell us in the comments, have you ever encountered a wild animal that needed help? What do you think Luna's story teaches us about the connection between individual conservation actions and species preservation? Your stories help keep Luna's message alive that every wild animal carries irreplaceable value worth protecting. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the most important genetic treasures in the world are carried by individuals who need help at exactly the right moment. And the difference between preservation and extinction can come down to one person's willingness to take extraordinary risks for extraordinary outcomes.